Oscar here? Is Susan Williams here? Oh, we were running out of submitters. Sarah Templeton. Sarah, how about we take you, and then we'll the others may arrive. So this is Sarah Templeton, who is wasn't due until 11. So thank you for being early.
It's all right.
Appreciate it. You've been watching what we do. We've got about 10 minutes. Members will have read your submission.
Yeah. Thank you very much for hearing me today. It's just a brief submission and 3 key points around engagement, around the carryover provisions from the ChCh Act, and a call for a review of the blueprint and the cost share agreement. Now, the second point of those has been really well canvassed by the City Council, and I agree with their points. Carryover provisions around demolition, ministerial veto. Is that not clear enough?
Yep, it's pretty good.
That's better.
Yeah, thank you.
Are not needed now. There is no emergency. There is no even mention of earthquake in the legislation, and those powers are no longer needed. I'd like to spend my time, however, talking about engagement and about the review. So currently, I talk to a lot of people around the city in the role that I have, both residents and business owners, and there is no sense of ownership of our rebuild currently. People aren't engaged in the process. They feel completely disenfranchised from their city. And there's in stark contrast to the approach that was taken initially with the Share an Idea campaign, where there was a sense of possibility, a sense of potential, a sense of ownership in our city, and a reason to stay because people could see a vision for the future. Now, when that was taken away from people and a locked room for 100 days was put in place and the blueprint came out, the lack of transparency around that process left people feeling completely disenfranchised. People felt no sense of ownership and felt like they had no reason to stay. It wasn't their city anymore. The rebuild was being done to us and not with us. The Crown have shown an ability to engage when they choose. There have been the odd time where they have said that they were engaging, but it was tick box and nothing was done and people didn't know it was happening. And they seem to be bemused at times over the lack of sense of engagement in the rebuild. One of the things that illustrates this really well is the Avon River Precinct. Now, the government has put a lot of money into the Avon River Precinct. The river's looking really nice, the bank's looking good. It's going to be lovely to walk around. And people I've talked to at ChCh and CCDU are completely bewildered by the lack of public positive outcry over how good this is going to be. And that's because they feel absolutely no sense of involvement in the Avon River Precinct. It's been done. The outcome may have been the same. The government could have engaged with the community may have said exactly the same things. It may have been exactly the same plans that came out, but the difference is in the outcome. The outcome currently looks like it will be there as a physical thing, but it won't be populated because people won't feel any sense of involvement and ownership of it. That's why process is so important. One of the key parts of the Avon River Precinct is the Victoria Square, and I don't know how many of you know that there was quite a big fuss made about the proposed changes to Victoria Square, because it's an area that, while it was sitting on damaged land and there was some cracked tiles and uneven land, it wasn't broken. And yet the government had decided to spend about $7 million redesigning it when people felt that it wasn't necessary. So Nikki Wagner directed a consultation process take place. It was actually really well set up. People didn't trust it particularly because there had been this history of things being done that weren't open, but it was done in good faith, and a 2-stage process of consultation which has ended up both giving a sense of more trust in that particular process, but also it saved the government money. It saved them millions of dollars on the redevelopment of a piece of land that didn't need to be done. There are going to be repairs now, but no major redesign. And that's what the people wanted. They didn't need something grand, and it's going to save the government a lot of money. People need to feel ownership of their city. They need to feel involved. Otherwise, there is no reason to stay. There have been examples overseas where the governments have stepped in and done large builds, large quick builds, and the cities have died because the people weren't involved. It was done to them and not with them. So I'll leave that bit there and go through to the cost share and the blueprint. Now the blueprint came out with a lot of fanfare, and nearly 4 years ago by the time the change in legislation takes place. So by April next year, we'll have had 5 years since the major earthquake. We'll have had 4 years of the blueprint, and it's time to review it. Any large business around the world that wants to be successful reviews its plans on a regular basis. It goes, what was my plan? How are we tracking? Is it still fit for purpose? That builds confidence in a business and makes it more successful. And we need that with our rebuild as well. So even in a purely economic sense, if we want our city to be successful, not only do we need to engage, we need to review the blueprint. We need to see whether those particular anchor projects and other things, we need to look at accessible city, livable city, and see whether that's still fit for purpose. If the review shouldn't be scary, it can only have a positive outcome. If the review finds that the current blueprint and arrangements in place are fit for purpose and are still going to give us a successful rebuild, then that will build confidence in the rebuild. It will draw investment when people are currently not trusting. If the review shows that the blueprint needs adjusting in some way, then those adjustments can be done and build confidence in the rebuild and draw investment. And I would argue that that needs to be entrenched in the legislation, and that a time frame needs to be given in the legislation for a review. Once a review of the blueprint is done, it will necessitate a review of the cost share agreement, because there will be probably likely to be changes need doing. And I think that needs to be in the legislation, otherwise it just won't happen. And that's what I have to say today. Thank you very much.
Now, I think Eugenia's got a question.
Thank you, Sarah. As chair of the Hagley Ferrymead Community Board, can you just talk about how the board process of engagement works? Because we've heard from a lot of submitters about the lack of voice, and it's what model should be used to get good consultation, good engagement. So is it the Local Government Act, and is that the best model, or in terms of the best practice with community engagement?
The Local Government Act is really good and clear in directing that we consult, but you can do many different things within that. And ChCh has shown lots of different models, from the different models used by the transitional city groups, so Gap Fill, Greening the Rubble, and their community engagement, and to the ones that the Local Government and ChCh do through the community boards and through the council. Council processes are still quite, there is like the formal process that council goes through, but it's changing to be much more of a grassroots one, going where the people are rather than calling them into you, and those kind of things. Having a much wider range of people involved, focusing on youth. Currently, we've just done our community board plan. There's a real focus on getting the voice of youth in the development of our area, and they've been really, really successful. Just like to point out that there's a personal submission though. It's just that I have that experience. Yeah.
Sure. Todd's got a question.
Thank you.
Very good submission. You referenced the process that Nikki Wagner
That's right.
led. Could you just add to that a little bit? I'm not from Christchurch, so I'd be just interested in a little bit more understanding around what went on there and why you thought it was so successful.
Yeah. So they've done several things which have been successful in this case, and the first thing was that when the plans came out and showed that Victoria Square was going to be redeveloped, it was going to be a big, flat, wide open space so markets and things could be held. There was an outcry. People love Victoria Square. People already hold markets in it, even though it's not flat, precisely because it is a nice people-centred space. So she held a meeting on site of people who were interested, people who had emailed her office, and talked to them about the plans and the potential. And after that conversation said, okay, so we will engage properly. It was a two-stage process. The first one was online and fill-in form. I think that, and where people could say what they would like to see in Victoria Square. So it was more of a start from scratch, at which point people didn't trust it particularly because there had been this history. But from my conversations with people in at ChCh and CCDU, it was in good faith. From that, it was very clear, from the two and a bit thousand papers that came back and online, it was really clear that people liked the way it already was, wanted it as a pedestrian space, that markets were very, very low at the list of possible activities. And so a draft was designed based on that, which was very, very close to the original, or the current design, the 1987 design. One mistake that was made, I think, was that they asked people to come to them for the actual personal interactions as part of the consultation process. They had a shipping container, the future ChCh container, in Restart Mall, which is more populated by tourists and not the sort of residents, that they asked people to come to that at 2 different times, and into ChCh. And I think that actually going out to more of the markets around town would have been really good. Go to places where people already visit. So I was involved in another way. So they set up an independent community reference group to oversee the process, to help build trust in the process, and I was asked to chair that group. And I, as an individual member of that group rather than the consultation team, booked a stall at the Downtown Farmers Market, which was hugely successful. Got a member of the CCDU staff along as well, and we had the plans and feedback forms, and we engaged with a lot of people one-on-one at that on a Saturday morning, which was really good.
Thank you.
The second stage was people commenting on the draft. So.
And Sarah, on that note, we need to draw the submission to a close, but thank you very much, very
No, that's
useful.
fine.
And
Thank you very
thank you
much.
for taking the time to
Thanks, Sarah.
be with us on a
Yes.
Saturday morning. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Now,